Carl here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial for short. And it is one of the biggest bands of metal making their grand return on September 30th, 2022. It's Slipknot, the 18-legged beast, return with their new and 7th album, The End So Far, out via Roadrunner Records. What age were you? What age were you when you first heard Slipknot, first came across the beast that was Slipknot? I was 15. I was 15 and saw the video for Wait and Bleed. You know the one I'm talking about? The live one, the chaos, the absolute noise that came from that. Blown away. Couldn't quite believe such a band existed. This is at the point where I'm still finding my feet in the metal world as well. Heavily into new metal and bands in that vein before moving on to other genres after that. So yeah, Slipknot quite early on absolutely blew me away. I didn't love, though, that's the thing, overall I didn't love the self-titled album, the one that had Wait and Bleed and Spit It Out and Sick and stuff like that on it. But it was actually Iowa that connected with me much more when that came out a few years later. I remember being in college and buying that album on day one release in a shop, actually buying the CD version in a shop. Can you believe it? I'm loving that album, still do to this day, still think it's Slipknot's best work. And from that, you know, carried on following them, Volume 3, and so on. But I never quite was able to recapture the magic that Iowa had for me. And over the last, decade or so, I've had a bit of a love-dislike relationship with Slipknot. Not hate. I don't use the word hate ever. In that, I've liked a lot of what they do, but I've really disliked a lot of also what they do. Never really find the balance, but man, admiring and being blown away by just how big they became. Getting to see them live a few times, not just at festivals, but their own shows, and always being mesmerized by the talent and the way in which they went from what they were back in 1999, if not earlier than that, to this giant of metal. So much so that this new album is probably one of the most hotly anticipated releases of 2022. Generally, not necessarily mine, but certainly generally I think I understand, and I think it's amazing that this is coming, and it's big. It's big news. Was I that excited for it before listening to it? Truth be told, no. I checked out the singles. I liked some of them. Bit on the fence with other ones, which that seems to be a general consensus as well. But certainly intrigued for what was coming from this album. As much as anybody else, as much about the story behind it, what it might mean. And I haven't given it a lot of thought. I haven't put in lots of analysis and tried to work out, is this the end of Slipknot? Is it just the end of the relationship with Roadrunner Records, and so on and so forth? And there's lots of theories out there. I think make up your own mind. I just think it's an interesting time for Slipknot in their lives, clearly. And this album, I think, reflects that. I think it's certainly very experimental. I think that's a word that's going to come up more than anything else as I talk to you about this album. It's the word experimental. But, enough about that. Let's talk about the album. A band that needs little introduction, and a band that continues to evolve album after album. Slipknot's meteoric rise to the top over the past few decades has been well and truly earned. The members have spilt a lot of blood, gallons of sweat, and a fair few tears, and rightfully the fan base has responded. It's what means The End So Far is one of, if not the most hotly anticipated albums of the year. The slew of singles has done little to whet the appetite, I think. So it's immediately exciting to get an unheard one with the opener of Adderall, where an ominous tone transitions into startling slower and a hypnotic style tune. The electronica contained atmosphere balanced by clean vocals, crooning harmonization, and a sense of drifting in a sea of nothingness. It's easy to bemoan the lack of explosivity at the start of a Slipknot album, but the unique nature of this opening track I think certainly makes a mark. Though, of course, don't worry, if you're after something with bite, the Dying song, Time to Sing, and the Chapeltown Rag will deliver, and then some. The riffs are furiously chaotic, the percussion is ungodly powerful, the effects are blended quite nicely here, and the vocals are particularly rabid. I think Corey's doing some of his best vocals on this album overall. It is two good examples of Slipknot's raw power and modern production. You're not missing a single thing on this album, which is incredible when you consider the level of noise this band is exuding here. Now, I said at the start, and I'm going to repeat it here again, one word that is going to come up a fair bit throughout the end so far is experimental. And the next track, Yen, it embodies that. Slipknot experimenting in ways that we haven't experienced from them possibly ever. The menacing tone, the swell of melody, the dangerous expulsion of deck scratching, and the following breakdown. It's one of the album's most captivating tracks, growing and growing in strength the more times it's played.
A chance to make me choke, you're all I can think about. The taste is red and rust.
Which is certainly, I think, something that applies to the album as a whole. It is an album of multiple listens. It's an album that requires time and a willing level of investment from you, from me, from us, the listeners. There's just too many layers to take it all in just a handful of run-throughs. A pointed and punchy set of lyrics adds a lot of weight to Hive Mind. Slipknot directing their scorn at society at large and spitting out some of their heaviest sounds so far. The riffs are bone-scraping here, but a harmonised chorus softens the teeth-grinding edge. That's then followed by the feral-sounding groove-infused monster that is Warranty. This track is going to sound even more immense live. That's the biggest vibe I got from this one. This one is going to be fucking excellent in the live environment. Slipknot, though, then jump feet first into the deep pool of experimentation with a thick, infectious and dramatically dark flair of Medicine for the Dead, a track that holds one of the album's most dangerous sounding riffs, before things get even stranger and way more unexpected with the grunge tinge of Acidic. Likely to be one of the more polarizing tracks in the album, I think. It's not that it's bad or anything, more rather that it's such a shift in tone for Slipknot. It's going to have as many people who dislike it as like it. Again, I think multiple listens and an unpicking of detail is super necessary here. And at its core, it's still got that simmering Slipknot intensity. But this track, Acidity, is one I think I'm most intrigued to hear people's opinions about. Particularly the ones who either hate it or the ones that love it, and sort of see the difference and what each are getting from it. For the record, I think it's interesting. But going back to intensity, talking about intensity, Heirloom is a chunky slab of heavy instruments and statement-making vocals. The thump of the drums leads the rhythm, and it all coalesces into a soaring and harmonious chorus nicely. Whereas H377 is pure punch and power. Slipknot taking us back in time almost for a frantic and anthemic blast of ferocity. The speed of the instruments here is one thing, but the vocals, they're amazing and it's startling stuff. And again, it is going to be a track that is going to be brutal in the live environment. Now, whereas there was no familiarity with that track, the penultimate offering, that is the Sun, continues the experimental growth of Slipknot. It's a slow-moving and haunting track that breaks like waves on the bedrock of melody. The vocals reaching smooth levels not heard on the album in quite this way. Yet as it goes on, chaos begins to enter the scene more and more, and things get harder and rougher, capped off by some very enigmatic guitar soloing. It's a fascinating listen, but almost pales in that regard to the finale of Finale. Slipknot introducing some tear-jerking piano tones, poignant strings, and dramatic melodies to leave the listener cold all over. It begs the question, is this the end? Who knows? But this is a statement of a closing track, especially as it ends in a way that almost bookends the album alongside Adderall, suggesting almost this is a bit of a cycle and we're all trapped within it. So there it is. What will go down as the most experimental Slipknot album to date, where predictability is a word that no one can use when describing it, which is really cool in itself that I think that and I can say that. Where many listens aren't just recommended, but I think are required to fully appreciate just how unique a lot of this album is. Does all this experimentation work? I don't think always, but even those moments are at least interesting. This is an album I think over time people are going to have a lot stronger opinions than initially the first listen. You listen to this once, you might not really enjoy it. 10 times, you might have a very different opinion. Who knows what the future holds for Slipknot? But right now, they continue to prove that their position at the top is more than deserved. That even this long into their careers, with all the blood, sweat and tears shared, they can still evolve and challenge all perceptions of what people expect of them. It is the end so far. It is the new and 7th Slipknot studio album. I really, really like it. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I expected to feel quite so strongly about it as I do. I really am going to give this a lot more time, and I suggest you do the same once you can. It is out in a few days' time, September 30th, 2022 via Roadrunner Records. You don't need me to tell you to check it out. It's a Slipknot album. You're going to check it out. When you do, you know you want to come back here and talk to me about it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?